Greetings. This is Pat, pastoral intern with First Congregational United Church of Christ in Lockport, Illinois, sharing with you a summer's Bible study. And this is our fourth session, the fourth video. And I hope you've been able to see the first three. And if not, no problem, stop right there. You can go to the church Facebook page and find that the first three videos are still posted. You can begin at any time and follow along at your convenience. That's what makes this video Bible study portable. You can take it with you anywhere on your smartphone, your tablet, or your laptop, as well as the Bible. Yes, you can carry a book along with you, but the Bible can also be found online. I recommend BibleGateway.com. BibleGateway.com presents all different translations of the Bible where you can easily find verses and resources, and it's all right there online like the video. So, how have you done with video 3 or since video 3? Have you felt like you're moving from read to interpret? Remember, I said it's a very gray area. Actually, as we read, we can't help but think or question or observe, and that gets us into interpret. Anytime we read the Bible, our mind, our heart, our spirit is being filled in ways that maybe we don't even realize. A woman was walking home with a friend. They had attended a neighborhood Bible study. And during that evening, the woman noticed her friend was quite inspired. And she was curious. She thought, maybe if I knew, we could discuss a little bit on our walk home. So she just casually said to the friend, "You were very inspired tonight with the Bible study." Well, the friend had to laugh a little bit and said, "I'm not quite sure if it was the Bible study. I think I became inspired when the dishes of ice cream were being passed around." Well, I think ice cream would probably inspire me a little bit too. But let's think along the lines of maybe scooping out some of what we've noticed from the Moses story as we get into interpret. And what have you done with the W's? Did they make it convenient to sift out some details and to find something that's meaningful to you? Did you lift anything from the who, or the where, or the when, or the what? I hope that that was a way to begin to interpret. And so let's do a little bit of that together in this session. I have made some lists of the W's, and I hope you have too. In fact, if you don't have them with you, or if maybe you marked your Bible and you need to get that, go ahead and pause me. It's all right. You can just pause me, get yourself organized, and then we'll share a little bit together. All right then, let's start scooping. And let's start with maybe what's the longest list, the who. There's a lot of characters in this story, and let's list them and also test ourselves a little bit with their identities. Do we remember who they were in the story? I'll start and you compare. I hope that there are some on your list that are not on mine. I started very general. I started with the groups of people, the Egyptians and the Hebrews. Now, remember, the Hebrews came to be called the Israelites and are called the Jews. That's all one group of people. We'll go from referring to them as the Hebrews to referring to them more as the Israelites. I put down now some specific names. I put down the princess. I thought she was pretty important because she could have ended the story right there by following her father's decree. I put down Moses' sister. Remember in the reeds? Do you remember her name? Miriam. Excellent. I put down Miriam, and I put down Moses' brother. Did you remember his name? Aaron. You're doing very well. I also put down Moses' mother, and her name was Jochebed. I don't know if her name was mentioned in our verses, but now you know, and you have that information. I put down Moses' wife as well. I know she didn't have a speaking part. She didn't even have a part, maybe, in the story, but she was mentioned, and her name was Zipporah. There was Moses' father-in-law, Jethro. He did give Moses a job, and of course his daughter's hand in marriage. Well, let's go back to Egypt and to the Pharaoh. Now, according to some research and studies, this Pharaoh could have been Amenhotep II. Amenhotep II was very athletic, a very strong man. And so it's no wonder that his heart was hard. Over and over again, remember those phrases. The Pharaoh's heart was hard. The Pharaoh's heart hardened. God hardened the Pharaoh's heart. Now, that phrase is somewhat troublesome when we begin to interpret. Would God ever harden a heart? God seeks our hearts, wants to open our hearts. For this, maybe we need to go to a scholar for some interpretation. John Currid writes, he tries to explain the Pharaoh's heart was hard well before Moses' mission, well before the Pharaoh and our God met. We go back to the Pharaoh's treatment of the Israelites, of the Hebrews, and becoming harsher and harsher on them as slaves. God allows human free will, and the Pharaoh's will was to become very hard on the Hebrews and to resist the challenges of God in spite of being brought down time and time again. This also has led us to the most prominent who, God and Moses. And let's leave them, let's come back to them a little bit later in our study. And let's get our spoons and start scooping a little more through the W's. And I'll try and go a little bit faster through the lists and be able to have details for all of them. So let's take a look at where. And again, I started very general. I started with Egypt, and then the wilderness, and then the promised land. I know they didn't actually enter the promised land in this story, but it was the reason for God leading through the wilderness. It was mentioned many times, and they did reach its border. Then I became more specific. I had down the Nile River. That could have been the demise of Moses, and it became his freedom. I had down the palace where he spent his early years. Moses spent his early years. I had the labor grounds where the Hebrews were slaving, the Midian desert that Moses was escaping through, the water well at Midian. I thought that that was a rather important what, showing more of Moses's personality. The sheep grazing grounds, why, that's where Moses heard God. The Red Sea, which became the Hebrews' escape from the Egyptians. And then there was Marah and Elim. Those places really showed the Hebrews' loyalty and how strong it was to this God. Mount Sinai, not only the peak, but the foot of the mountain were important locations. And then outside Canaan, the promised land was known as Canaan. Well, let's go through the when. And I know there's not much to list because the story really doesn't give us dates. So we might again have to go to some research. And for that, I found that Moses was estimated to live between 1526 and 1406 BC. Now, let me digress just a little bit to these abbreviations BC and AD, which you may be familiar just because they are references to our time, to how time is divided. There's BC, which is before Christ, or we think Old Testament if we're talking Bible, and AD, which is after Christ, after the death of Christ, the New Testament if we're talking Bible, but really it stands for the year of our Lord, and that's the time that we are in. But I don't know if it's to be politically correct or exactly why, but these abbreviations have been changed. And so now, instead of BC or AD, we just talk Common Era. We've sort of removed Christ from the reference. And the Common Era that Moses lived in would be BCE, before the Common Era. And then after Christ, or our time, or the year of the Lord, is just considered Common Era. Well, the estimated time that the Hebrews were in Egypt was some 400 years. Now, they weren't slaves all of that time, but a good portion of that time. The Hebrews got to Egypt through Joseph, and that's a whole different story. That would make another excellent summer Bible study. But Joseph was there in Egypt, and he brought his father and his brothers, he brought his family to Egypt from their native land to escape a horrible famine. So that's how the Hebrews made it to Egypt, became very prosperous, populated, and then finally a threat to the Pharaoh. All right, let's move into what, and I know this list could be substantially long because there's so many that could be a what detail. And I'll just go through a few and see how it compares. And again, I hope that you have a lot of different ones. And so together we have a major list of what. There were the death proclamations by the Pharaoh, the waterproof basket. I thought that was sort of a neat what. The reeds tall enough to hide a person. The princess's curiosity and pity. How about the mother's wise decision and the instruction that she was able to give her toddler? The harsh treatment of the Hebrew slaves. The slaves' dispute. Remember the two slaves that were fighting and Moses intervened? The harassment of the maidens at the well. The sheep herding job. That's where Moses heard God. The burning bush. Moses' staff. Remember the powers that it was given that he could demonstrate? And then there were all those gnats and flies and frogs and locusts during the plagues. There was the manna and the quail, which sustained the Hebrews in the wilderness. The guiding pillars. Oh, I hope you put down the pillars that represented God, the smoke and the flame. The mountaintop. And how about the stone tablets? 2 sets of stone tablets, remember? There was also the golden calf. What was that all about? What led the Hebrews to that extent to build that kind of a God? Well, we have done a lot of sifting, and we have a long list of details in the process. And don't be overwhelmed. I know there's a lot to remember and a lot that we have listed, but this just goes to show all that's in this one story that we can work with and maybe find meaning. So let's lift one element from all the details that we have together. Let's go back to the who list and, let's list Moses. What stands out to you about Moses? What really caught your attention about this character? I'll share a few of mine and just see what it prompts in your thoughts. First of all, I just marveled that Moses was human. Now you might say, well, obviously, that's not a great observation. Well, yes, he had hair and hands and feet and legs. He was human, but that's maybe not what really is prompting my observation. I think it's his humanness. When we stop to think about it, Moses was a hot-tempered fugitive in this story. He lacked confidence. He had no particular skill. Yes, he was palace educated. He was raised a royal, but what could he do? He could make excuses, and he could even refuse. All of these flaws and weaknesses and vices of Moses. And yet, secondly, my second observation is that Moses was chosen. God called Moses to be a part of God's plan. God called Moses and expected him to be a leader, a messenger. Wow. That leads me to another observation, which I think is my main one with Moses, that Moses had a privileged relationship with God. Moses heard God. Moses heard God, and the story seems to imply that Moses heard God's voice like you are hearing mine. And Moses talked with God. He discussed. In fact, he even suggested, said, God, do you really want to do that to the Hebrews? Do you maybe want to save face? And God listened and conversed with Moses. And Moses saw God, even from the back. Finally, Moses was obedient and faithful. For all of his weaknesses, Moses really did obey God. And look at all that Moses had to do over and over, all those times that he had to go to Pharaoh, all those trips of climbing up and down Mount Sinai. Moses was an obedient, faithful, servant leader. Well, looking at our list, we have concluded quite a bit about Moses from all of the details that we've lifted from the story. And we can do the same thing as we look at God in the story and what stands out about God from this story. What attracted us? What did we notice, or what gave us meaning about God? And that's where I'm going to be leaving you until session 5. I'm going to ask you to go back through the story and to lift what occurs to you about God. Maybe it's the nature of God, something about the nature of God, God's powers, God's plan, God's promises, anything that you might have observed or even questioned. Again, this is going to take us from interpret and move us into our third phase, apply. It's still a very gray move from interpret to apply. We've probably already started to do a little bit of that, but we're going to try and be more conscious in our next session together and actually ask ourselves, what out of this story could apply to me? And what out of this story could apply to the 21st century? So in the meantime, lift what you can about God and think in terms of what might apply to us today. I look forward to continuing with you. And by the way, why not make an ice cream stop before session 5? I do like peanut butter and caramel, anything in those flavors. It's been great to be with you. Enjoy the summer, and God bless.